Now that you have collected all of your 30 note cards, we are going to organize those note cards together so that you can actually start to write your paper. So this video will just talk to you about the structure of the paper. I will identify another video for you that talks a little bit about how you're going to integrate your quotes and how you can write some of your sentences. So just a reminder, as you're writing the paper, you'll want to take a look at making sure that your paper is double spaced, that you have 1-inch margins all the way around. The 1-inch margins should automatically be part of the Google document when you open it. That you do have your 4-line MLA heading on the top left. That you are using 12-point font Times New Roman. You may have to make those changes because it typically comes out Arial 11 when you first start a new Google Doc. And then don't forget that you need to add the page number and the header in the upper right-hand corner. Let me just show you very quickly how to make sure you have the page number on there. You can't just go up into the top of the page and actually add the page number. You actually have to add pagination. And so by doing that, you go up to Insert, and then you go down to Page Numbers, and then you have some different options, and you see that we want this particular option right here. So the very first page, we'll start with page number 1, and it'll go all the way through the Works Cited page and have everything that will be automatically page numbered. So when you do that, that will show up on your paper like this. So this first one right here will be page number 1. Now, typically what we wanted to do is be a little bit lower because if it's at the very top of the page, it won't actually show up in the document. So you want to make sure that you just hit the Enter key and then go down 1. Also, the other thing to remember is that this is also going to be Arial. So you're going to need to change that to Times New Roman and then the 12-point font. And then from there, you can just add your last name. And that's how you simply do that. So by actually inserting the page number, then what will happen is the top of every page will have your last name and then the next page number. So that's the easiest way to do it. So let's talk about what the structure of this paper is going to look like and just some things that you're going to need to do. Remember, you're going to need to do citations. Again, we will talk about what the MLA in-text citations are going to look like. You will always need to cite the author's last name and the page number that you got the information from. If you don't have an author, you're going to cite the title of the piece. And if there's no page number, you will use the abbreviation N.PAG. When citing the movie, you will use the name of the movie. And it should be in italics. The movie should always be in italics. So the bottom line is you must document everything from your note cards that was quoted material, paraphrased material, summarized material. That's why you were writing the note cards with the author's last name and the page numbers on there so that you know that everything that's taken from a note card must be cited. Remember that as you go through this, you want to make sure that you have lead-ins. The rest of this information, which is called research paper, writing the paper, is located in Schoology. And I will set up another video that talks to you about how to do in-text citations. But these should be very similar to when we did the Huckleberry Finn critical analysis. So you want to make sure that you have a lead-in. And then here are some examples of some lead-ins. The parenthetical reference is making sure that you're pointing out the reference at the end. So here's an example with the lead-in and then the page number, as Andrew Sinclair points out, comma, and the quotation mark, then the page number comes at the end. We know that this is Sinclair who's the author, so we don't actually have to put his name at the end citation. If we don't actually include the author's last name, in this case we did not, Jack London's separation from his first wife, Bess, became a great help to him in an unexpected way. And then we've got the quote here, explaining the quote, and then of course Sinclair is the one who wrote it. So because the author's name and page number are then placed together at the end, remember there's no comma in between, there's just a space in between. There might also be a time when you've summarized several pages. Anyway, the rest of this document really walks you through what it is that you should do for every citation question that you could possibly have. So we will go through this as you have any questions and talk about different things that you can use, how to do block quotations, making sure that you do not overquote. But I just wanted to make you aware that this is the first thing you should do is read through this writing the paper so that you know what it is that you're supposed to be doing as just kind of a reminder of what your paper should look like. Let's talk about the organization and what the paper should actually look like when you write it. Okay, so here are the paragraphs that you will have. Your first paragraph should be your introductory paragraph. You need an attention getter, and then your bridge, where you're taking the information that connects the attention getter to the thesis idea, naming the film, and then 1 to 2 sentences about what the film is about, very briefly. And then if there aren't a lot of, if you can list a few of the stars in the movie if you want, as long as the list isn't too extensive. And then your thesis. And we'll go through some different examples of thesis statements so that you can kind of see what it is that you'll be putting in for your thesis. So that's paragraph number 1. Paragraph number 2 is the movie summary page. I want you to take note of this. It should not be more than half a page. We're talking 5 to 8 sentences that sum up the movie. I do not want an entire page. I do not want 2 of your 4 to 6 pages to be a movie summary. You're introducing, as you're summarizing, the main details that the reader's probably going to need to know to understand the paper. So, for example, if I'm writing about A Beautiful Mind, and one of the things I'm actually going to write about is schizophrenia, then I would want to make sure that in this introduction, I identify the fact that he was an incredible mathematician who actually suffered from schizophrenia, because I'm going to be talking about that. If I'm not going to be talking about it, then perhaps I'll just say he was a troubled mathematician. And if I'm going to be talking about like how well his wife and his family life was going to be portrayed, then I would focus on that. So this 5 to 8 sentence paragraph should include the summary of the movie, the characters and the plot, the actual characters, not the stars, the actual characters, and then a plot, and then a sentence explaining maybe kind of why you're giving the summary, so that it's to better understand the elements of the movie that you're talking about. The next part of your paper will be your body paragraphs. You may have anywhere from 1, 2, 3 to 5 body paragraphs. Typically, you'll have 3 body paragraphs. So you're going to introduce topic number 1 from your thesis, and then talk about it through what the research says, what the movie shows, and then analyze it. Topic number 2 with the transition that introduces the next topic, and then topic number 3, possibly a topic number 4. So for sure, you'll have 3 full body paragraphs that introduce all of these different types of topics that you're going to discuss in your paper. And then you'll have your conclusion, where you'll restate your thesis, recap the ideas, and then try to end with something big. Use a quote if you want to, but make sure that you've sort of introduced what it is that we need to know about the quote somewhere earlier in your paper. And then when you're done with your paper, it should feel like a finale. So this is just the way that you should organize your paper. What makes this different from a 5-paragraph essay is the fact that in the middle of all of this, the paragraph 2 is actually our movie summary. So we actually end up having 6 paragraphs if we're writing about 5 different things in our movie. We have the introduction, the summary, our 3 body paragraphs, and then our conclusion. So we end up with 6 total paragraphs. So let's take a look at a student example, and I'll walk you through exactly what this should look like. Notice in the student example, we've got the last name and the page number at the header up here. And then we've got the heading, student name, teacher name, the college class, and then the date inverted with no commas. Our title, notice the title is just centered, but it's regular font. It's not bold, it's not underlined, it's not in italics. And then notice here's my introduction, and you can see the introduction is about half a page. In the introduction, we've got the attention getter, and then the bridge, and then my thesis. Notice how every time I identify the movie, which is called United 93, the movie is always identified in italics. Now, there might be a time when you are referring to something where the person's name is the name of the movie. So then if you're talking about the movie, you would italicize it. Like, for example, Rocky. And if you're talking about the person, you wouldn't italicize it. So you just have to be very aware of the fact in your paper of, are you talking about the movie or are you talking about the person? I have a very brief summary here of the movie with my bridge. And then I have my part of thesis. And you can see my main research topic is how Hollywood producers realistically showed this movie, this particular information. And then I'm going to discuss that through the planning of the terrorists, the heroism of the passengers and crew, and the results of the attacks on the nation. That's my part of thesis. Those are the 3 things that I am going to talk about. Now, here's my movie summary. Notice how brief it is, right? It's half a page, just kind of it's a little more than half a page, just kind of identifying what the movie summary is. And I've identified to my audience that before considering the movie's accuracy, it's also important to know what the main events were from the movie. Then I'm going to go into a little bit more detail. Notice how I'm not using you, the second person you. I'm not using the third person I, or the first person I or we. So if you can eliminate that at all, it's better to do that. And there are ways to write sentences so that you're not doing that. At the end of my movie summary, I'm actually going to cite the movie. Now, every time you take any information from the movie, you need to cite it in your paper. And you'll see that as we go through some of these points. Notice how my movie citation is the actual title of the movie, and then N period, PAG period, no spaces in between that. Now I have to transition from my movie citation, essentially from my thesis summary, into my first point. So I basically, now that the movie has been summarized, it's important to look at how accurately it reflects history. This is my main topic, how accurately it reflects history. Notice how up here, that's what I was talking about, like how the producers realistically showed that. So first, this is my transition into my first primary point. So you essentially have two transition sentences here. One is transitioning the reader from the summarization back into the main point that I'm going to talk about, the main thesis. And then the next one is transitioning them from the main thesis into the first point that I'm going to discuss. Notice again how my movie is in italics, and here's my first point that I'm discussing. And then really here's what you can see that I want you to look at, is I want you to see that I've repeated the topic from my thesis. I have a lead-in with my credentials, according to Dennis B. Roddy and his colleagues, staff writers for PG News. That's my credentialing. The 5 terrorists carefully planned out the roles. Because I've identified Roddy here in text, then I have to make sure I'm just citing it with no page, because it's obviously a website. And I don't have to put Roddy in the parentheses here. So I'm giving you my primary point, my secondary support, and then I'm basically explaining that citation about basically telling my reader why I put that in there. Like, why did I include this information about what Roddy said? Well, that's because these events are clearly shown at the beginning of the movie. So then I'm going to go back and forth between the movie and my research. So notice here, I've cited the movie, and then I go back into discussing somebody else with other credentials about the education of the terrorists. This one actually was from ABC News, written by Brian Ross and Sarah Andrews, and there was actually a page number, so I've cited the page number. Again, here's my secondary support. Okay, and back and forth, now I've talked about the movie again, transitioning to another point, and then talking back about the movie. So you'll notice as you read this example that it goes back and forth between the movie and my research. You cannot show me the research and the information that you found if you can't also identify to me where in the movie and specifically what part of the movie you are talking about. So you have to go back and forth between the two. And then, of course, at the end of my first point, I have a concluding sentence. Now, after my first point, I am now transitioning into the second point of my thesis. Notice here, I'm already on page 3, right? By the time I did my introduction and I did my movie, I mean, this, you can see how the paper actually could easily be 4 to 6 pages. So I'm going to transition into my second point now. Not only is it important for us to look at the terrorist plans, but perhaps something more important would be how the passengers reacted to it. And then, of course, this paragraph would continue to analyze the point 2 with more movie details and more support. You would then move into point 3. I don't actually have the 2 full paragraphs of point 2 and point 3 here, but they're very similar to paragraph for your point number 1, where you're transitioning back and forth between the movie and your research. And then here's an example of my introduction, where I'm basically restating my thesis, connecting it back to my attention getter, and then just generally making a summary about it, and then a clincher at the end. So this is my conclusion, okay? Now we're going to look at the works cited page. No extra spaces. It says works cited. Notice that although you are doing an annotated bibliography, The annotated bibliography does not show up in your final paper. It is a separate document that we're going to talk about that you'll turn in prior to writing the paper. These are all alphabetical order by the author's last name. They all have hanging indents, which is exactly the opposite of when you are doing paragraph writing. You have italics on books and italics on magazines, italics on websites. So if you look at that, you can see that Journal of American History is a magazine, PG News is a website, Cable News Network is a website, and then A Day Forever Remembered is a book. So the books are italicized also, and then a period at the end of every citation. And so that's what that looks like. In this particular case, the movie is cited last just because it starts with a U. But this is how you're going to cite the movie in your works cited page. You'll put the name of the movie, who it was directed by, a couple of the main performers, the studio that put the movie out, and then the year that it was released. You don't need an actual date, just a year is fine. So this is an example. I would, if you are a distance learner, I would print this off and have this next to me, because everything you need to know about how this particular document is supposed to look is shown on this example. One of the things I want to point out to you is the verb tense. And this is going to be one of the requirements that I have for the paper. When you are writing about the movie, you should be writing in present tense. So assuming that the movie is like an actual thing that's happening now. The historical event then is being analyzed based on what happened in the past. So those verbs should be past tense. So be very careful as you're writing that when you're inserting information about the movie, whether you're quoting from the movie or talking about the movie, those should all be present tense verbs. But when you're identifying, like according to Roddy in his article, this is what actually happened, you would say happened, not happens. So it would be past tense for your historical events. So all three of these documents, this student example of Flight United 93, how to organize your research paper, and then what you actually need to know to write the paper are all available on Schoology. I would highly recommend that you read through all of them and take a look at them prior to writing your paper and have them available and understand what it is you have to do. So in some of the other subsequent videos, we'll talk specifically about how to integrate quotes into your writing.